talk about hormones, we have to put our focus on the one gland in the body that actually regulates almost every physiological function of the body, every function of our cellular mechanics, of our metabolism, and also of our temperature. That's our thyroid, right? And our thyroid is basically the key metabolic master that actually is the key that goes into our cellular machinery. What does that mean? That basically means that it unleashes oxygen into all our cells. It unleashes oxygen throughout our entire body. It keeps us in a state of optimum respiration, right? Inspiration has a lot to do with respiration. So if you're respiring, meaning that you're breathing properly, you stay in a state of inspiration. And that has a lot to do with thyroid metabolism. So let's talk about what the thyroid is and what actually powers the thyroid. Our thyroid is basically like our shield gland. It's the protector of our hormones. So whenever we talk about hormonal imbalances, we have to really focus in on what's going on with the thyroid, because there's always some kind of thyroid issue, whether it's a hypothyroidism or it's a hyperthyroidism. Hypo meaning underactive, not responsive, not imbalanced. Hyper meaning hyper, it's hyper accelerated, it's hyper stimulated. That's when someone's losing weight way too quickly and they can't put weight on to stay in a metabolic balance. Hypothyroidism has to do with when our thyroid gland is underactive, and that's when you notice people that can't really lose a certain amount of weight, no matter how much raw food they do, no matter how much juicing they do, no matter how much working out and cardio they do, they can't quite lose all the weight. And a lot of times they end up going catabolic and kind of breaking themselves down from the inside out. And so we want to avoid all that, and we want to keep things modulated. We want to keep everything in balance. So understanding the functions of the thyroid gland is primary here. Now there's a few different hormones that the thyroid actually works with. Things like thyroid stimulating hormone, thyroid binding globulin, T4 and T3 conversion. Now this could get really complicated, but this is a very simplified overview. Basically, our thyroid is operating our entire endocrine system. It's operating all the hormones that are being sent throughout our what's called HPA axis, our hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And as I mentioned in a previous video, a lot of times thyroid imbalances have to do with an adrenal fatigue. So when we've hyperstimulated our body, we've hyperstimulated our adrenal glands, it actually causes our thyroid stimulating hormone to pull, to actually overcompensate for the energy loss from our adrenal exhaustion. Really important thing to consider there when we talk about the thyroid, because it's not always just the thyroid. It has to do with a combination of symphonic signals in our endocrine system. Remember, hormones are a symphony. It's an orchestra. It's based on rhythm, right? It's not based on one thing over-competing something else. Everything has to stay in its appropriate dance, its appropriate rhythm. So our thyroid, basically how it creates energy, how we create oxygen in our cells, is based on what's called T4 to T3 conversion. Now, let's simplify that whole thing for you. When people take thyroid medication, like Armour, for example, and many others, they become very addictive over time. They work. They definitely work for someone that has a thyroid metabolic issue. They definitely work, but one thing to understand is that those thyroid medications can become very, very addictive, and the primary reason for that is because there's a central ingredient in all those medications, and it's a little something called iodine. Iodine is the central atom or the central molecule, the mineral that actually powers on the lighthouse of our hormones, which is our thyroid gland. Our entire thyroid matrix runs primarily on iodine first and foremost. And in our country, in our world, we are severely iodine deficient. I've heard statistics up to 96, maybe even more than that percent of the population in the Western world is deficient in iodine. Right? We won't go into the whole rabbit hole about that. The whole controversy and the whole iodine conspiracy. But just understand that iodine is primary for our entire metabolic function. And so these medications are actually based on iodine. Like T4 means 4 iodine. T3 medication means 3 iodine. So you can actually remove that whole middleman equation and start supplementing with natural iodine. There's a number of options, like Lugol's is the original product that was put on the market. There's also Electrodyne. My personal favorite is Nascent's iodine, and that's what I personally use. That's what I recommend to other people. That's something you can do your own due diligence on. Let's talk about this whole thing, by the way. What is so interesting to me in the research about iodine and how it interacts with our thyroid metabolism is that we have receptor sites in our thyroid gland. Your thyroid gland, by the way, is like basically like a cartilage, or it's like a cage that houses thousands of micro glands. So there's actually like thousands of little thyroid glands swimming around that little puddle that controls our metabolism. I find that kind of interesting. And there's a number of factors that have to be put into focus about the thyroid. The first thing with iodine is that it plugs into a specific iodine receptor site in your thyroid gland that actually your thyroid will uptake that iodine and use that as its primary source of fuel. Okay? Now, what's going to happen if we have an iodine deficiency is that receptor site needs to get filled, right? Nothing can be kept in a state of a void. Everything has to be filled in. That's kind of the laws of the universe. There can never be a void, right? That's why we add things in instead of taking things out of our diet, so we don't create a void and revert back into old habits. Same thing with the receptor site. So what it'll do, if we don't have proper iodine, it will pick up other halogenic airborne particulates such as radioactive iodine 151 that's been spewed out into our environment all over the world from Fukushima, the residue from Chernobyl, all the different environmental airborne contaminants that our thyroid actually sucks up as a replacement for the natural iodine that it needs to function. Another thing is chlorine. Chlorine is what we call a halogen. It volatilizes off into the air and actually becomes an airborne particulate, toxin, and our thyroid will suck that up. And so one of the reasons for thyroid issues, in my opinion, has to do with chlorinated showers, right? So you need to actually get a filter on your shower, right? If you don't get a filter, you will become the filter. Really important thing to think about. Okay, so moving on from there, if you take the necessary iodine supplementation, seaweed is great, kelp is great, but in my opinion, based on our world, the level of toxicity in our world and how that's affecting our overall metabolic function, kelp is not going to be enough. Kelp's a great food. It's high in minerals. It's extremely powerful. It's a superfood for sure. But iodine supplementation, in my opinion, is absolutely necessary because it blocks off all those airborne halogens from entering into the receptor site. And your thyroid will always choose the upgraded form of fuel over all the inferior fuel when it has the availability to do so. So that's a really key distinction to make there. I want to end this video on a few things about the thyroid. This is such a vast topic, by the way. If you can't tell, like, we could go so far down the thyroid rabbit hole. It's pretty much endless at this point. But there are a few things I want to note here. Your thyroid gland is two really important things. It's the most vascularized area of your body, meaning that it attracts the most blood flow. There's no more area of your body that actually circulates more blood flow into itself than the thyroid gland. So making sure that you have a clean, slippery, fluid blood supply in your cardiovascular system, in your veins, your arteries, your capillaries, your cardiovascular health is really stable. That's going to influence the blood supply going to your thyroid. Another thing is that the thyroid actually monitors and modulates calcium levels in the blood by a hormone called calcitonin. So basically what that means is that hormone specifically regulates the calcium levels in our blood. So things like calcification, things like kidney stones, things like calcium excess or improper calcium metabolism, where our bones and our blood cells, whatever it is in our body that needs that calcium, is not able to efficiently absorb and assimilate into those areas because there's an imbalance in our thyroid processing station. So that's really important. The last thing I want to note here is that I'm in Sedona, Arizona right now. And as I sit here, it brings up an interesting perspective, is that whenever I think of the thyroid gland, I think of Los Angeles. And some people are like, whoa, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, basically, Los Angeles to me is like the most energetically concentrated area, maybe in the world. I don't know, Hollywood, right? It's got the most concentration of energy anywhere that I can think of. But with that, it's also possibly one of the most toxic areas in the world too. Now, the thyroid is the most energetically charged, negatively charged, or let's just say electrically charged area of your body, of any area. It's your metabolic switching station. So it switches on more physiological triggers in your body than anything else. It controls all the electricity in your nervous system, and it also tends to be the most toxic, because with that energetic magnetic force that the thyroid has, it pulls in all the particulates, it pulls in all the toxic elements in our environment and sucks it up into itself. It's basically a negative and positive electric attractor. So when we're in a state of alkalinity, right? We're in a state of cleanliness. We actually enhance what's called negative ionic sufficiency. We basically become more electric, and we're not attracting all the pollution in our world. That's when you do things like iodine, you're offsetting all the what's called positively charged electrons or positively charged pollution in our environment, in heavy metals, in mercury, and pathogens and things like this have a positive charge, and they end up breaking our body down over time. So what things like iodine do is help to block that stuff off and help us stay in a state of alkalinity like a battery. 80% alkaline, 20% acidic by ratio is kind of how we want to be. And there's a lot of other things that your thyroid runs on too. A few things I want to end here is coconut oil. Coconut oil is very specific for the function of your thyroid gland. It's been shown to actually enhance a hypothyroid situation. So when someone has an underactive thyroid, they have a metabolic problem, they're not able to lose weight, you can actually consume the medium chain fatty acids in coconut oil to help jumpstart your thyroid and teach your body how to burn fat by eating fat. And then also herbs like ashwagandha and maca have been shown to be very effective in thyroid imbalances. There's a number of other things. Sea salt and water is a really important thing to regulate your thyroid function. And iodine, of course, I've ranted and raved about iodine this whole video. It's at the absolute top of the list. So there you go. That is Thyroid Metabolism 101.